My daughter Ruby was 17 when the letter arrived. A plain white envelope, thin and unimpressive, sitting on the kitchen counter like it carried nothing but junk. I assumed it was a dorm assignment. A parking pass, maybe an ID update, some ordinary detail of her first year of college. I didn't open it. I just set it down, smiled at her, and said lightly, "Hey, you got some mail." She glanced at it once, then froze. The envelope was cheap, flimsy, definitely not the kind of packaging that screams congratulations. It looked more like the sort of thing that says overdue bill. Ruby didn't say a word. She picked it up, carried it down the hall, and disappeared into her room. I turned back to the stove, stirring pasta, until her voice cracked through the air like a snapped branch. "Mom!" I rushed to her room. She sat hunched on her bed, clutching the letter like it was radioactive. She didn't speak, just handed it to me. I read it once, then again, unable to believe it. "We acknowledge your decision to decline the scholarship. Your award has been given to the next qualifying candidate." I laughed, but not with humor. "You didn't decline anything right." She shook her head violently, eyes full of tears. Ruby had cried with joy when she first got her scholarship. She'd baked brownies for the admissions committee, framed her acceptance email. Decline it? That would be like torching a winning lottery ticket. I grabbed my phone and dialed the number at the bottom of the letter. The financial aid office put me on hold, violin music looping, while Ruby sat beside me in stunned silence. Finally, a woman answered. "We received a formal email from her registered address last week," she explained. "The withdrawal has already been processed. The scholarship's been awarded to another student." I felt my throat tighten. That's impossible. "It came from the address we have on file, Monday night at 7:47 p.m. Ruby went pale. That was her email, but she hadn't touched it. I asked for a copy. The woman chirped that she could forward it to the same account it came from, like that solved everything. "Sometimes students change their minds," she added. "Once reassigned, it's rarely reversible." Ruby whispered, "It wasn't me." Her voice was so small it broke something in me. This wasn't just a clerical mistake. Someone had deliberately impersonated her. Someone had stolen her future. I paced the kitchen, waiting for the forwarded message, chewing my nail until it bled. When it arrived, the timestamp lined up perfectly with the night of Ruby's graduation party. The same night, her cousin Chloe had asked to borrow her phone, claiming hers had died, and she needed to call her boyfriend. Ruby's hands shook as she pieced it together. "It was Chloe," she whispered. My stomach dropped. The betrayal wasn't just hers. It was mine. My younger sister, Vivian, Chloe's mother, and I had grown up in the same house of subtle favoritism. She was the golden one. I was the quiet one. She'd always had excuses made for her, always been shielded from consequences. Now it seemed her daughter had inherited both her entitlement and her cruelty. I drove across town to confront Vivian. I told myself I'd stay calm, factual, give her the benefit of the doubt. But the moment she opened the door, smiling like nothing had happened, restraint left me. I showed her the email, the timestamp. This was sent from Ruby's account while Chloe had her phone. She shrugged. "Are you sure it wasn't just Ruby?" My jaw clenched. "She helped your daughter with essays. She let her borrow her clothes, her confidence, her phone. And now Ruby's scholarship is gone." Vivian leaned back casually. "The winner's the one who gets the last word." I knew then she hadn't just looked the other way. She had orchestrated it. But there was something she hadn't counted on. I'm a mother, and mothers don't forget anything. That's when I remembered the backyard security camera motion activated with full audio. During the party, Chloe had stepped outside to call her boyfriend. Ruby's phone log confirmed it, one outgoing call to him at 7:50 p.m., minutes after the withdrawal email was sent. The footage showed Chloe on the patio, holding a phone that clearly wasn't hers, tapping furiously before making that call. It wasn't perfect proof, but it was damning enough. I filed a complaint with the university. Then I filed a police report. "Impersonation, fraud, academic sabotage," I told them. "Call it what you want, but it's theft." Ruby went to bed early that night. I sat awake with a cold cup of coffee, whispering to myself, "They think they broke her. But this isn't over." 3 days after I filed the police report, my phone rang. It was Vivian, her voice sharp with fury. "You sent the police to my house," she spat, controlled rage dripping through the line. You think that's how you handle something like this, by involving strangers? I almost laughed. Strangers. She'd helped her daughter steal my child's future, and she thought the scandal was the real problem. She went on about how Chloe had been crying, how I'd scared our parents, how I'd made the family a public spectacle. I hung up before she could say more. But her words stuck. Mom and Dad were there. The next morning, Ruby was still refreshing her inbox, desperate for some miracle reply from the university. The silence was eating her alive. I told her, "Get your shoes. We're going to see Grandma and Grandpa." We brought pancakes, because Ruby thought being kind might soften them, because I still half believed all we had to do was show them the evidence, walk them through it gently, and they'd understand. They'd be horrified they'd take our side. At least that's what I wanted to believe. They greeted us warmly like it was any other morning. My mom hugged Ruby and commented on her new shoes. My dad asked if we wanted orange juice. We sat at the table. I laid out the folder. "Before we say anything else, you need to see this." One by one, they flipped through the evidence: the email, the timestamps, the phone logs, the security footage of Chloe outside with Ruby's phone. Ruby sat rigid beside me, hands folded so tightly her knuckles were white. When my mother finally spoke, she didn't look at me. She looked at Ruby. "She's just a child." "She's 17, I shot back, "and she committed fraud." My father set the papers down gently. "She made a mistake. Maybe a poor decision, but she's a good kid." I blinked. You think she did it?" They exchanged a glance, then my mother spoke again. "We thought you might come. We've talked about it, all of us." My stomach dropped. "You knew." "We just agreed," my dad said quickly, as though that softened the blow. "Agreed to what?" "That Chloe needed it more." Ruby shot to her feet, her voice shaking. "You helped her take it from me." "No one took anything," my mother snapped, her voice finally rising. "It stayed in the family." "It didn't stay in the family," I said, standing too. "It was stolen." "She was devastated," my father said. "We knew you'd take it badly, so we didn't say anything. Chloe's not as strong as Ruby. We thought Ruby would understand." Ruby let out a laugh with no humor in it. "So you just let her lie." "We didn't want this to get ugly," my father said. "You involved the police. What did you think would happen?" "I thought I'd find out who betrayed us," I said coldly. "You already knew," my mother whispered. That was the moment something inside me switched off. Whatever fragile hope I'd carried, the hope they might choose truth over convenience, died right there at their table. We left without touching the pancakes. That night I blocked their numbers. No speeches, no drawn-out goodbyes. Just silence. Ruby didn't speak for hours. When she finally did, it wasn't to me. She opened the family group chat, scrolled until she found the last message from my dad, a meme about family loyalty, and then she uploaded 4 files: the screenshot of the withdrawal email, the phone log, a still frame from the security footage, and her own message. "Chloe sent the email from my phone. Vivian helped. Our grandparents knew. This is what happened. You can believe it or not, but this is the truth." She didn't wait for replies. We both knew there wouldn't be any. The university still hadn't responded. The start of term was 5 days away. No scholarship, no financial aid, no fallback plan. One night, Ruby said quietly, "It's not even about the money anymore. It's the fact that they looked at me and decided I wasn't worthy." Her words gutted me because they were true. 2 days before orientation, I got a message from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. I saw what Ruby posted. I forwarded it to someone. I hope that's okay. It was more than okay. It was the only lifeline we had left. The next afternoon, the phone rang again. This time it wasn't Vivian. It was a woman from the Hope Bridge Foundation. "We've reviewed Ruby's story," she said warmly. "We'd like to fully cover her tuition, effective immediately." I didn't cry right away. Not until I hung up, turned, and saw Ruby curled up on the couch, arms wrapped tight around her knees. "You're in," I whispered. She looked at me like she didn't believe the words. "We did it." "No," I told her. "You did." Orientation week arrived with a blur of new beginnings. Ruby packed her bags, checked her schedule twice, and stood straighter than I'd seen her in weeks. The Hope Bridge Foundation had covered her tuition, and while her original scholarship couldn't be reinstated, she was heading to college on her own merit and on the generosity of strangers who believed in her when her own family did not. But the storm wasn't over. Within days of her starting classes, the investigation moved forward. The police contacted us again requesting Ruby's statement. They'd gathered the forwarded email, the phone logs, and the security footage. It was enough to push the case from suspicion to action. Chloe was formally charged with computer misuse, academic fraud, and identity theft. The university moved swiftly, expelling her and voiding the scholarship. She was barred from receiving academic funding in the future, a devastating blow to a 17-year-old who had once bragged about her bright future. The court hearing was small, tense, and quiet. Ruby didn't have to testify, though. She sat beside me in the gallery, her face pale but determined. Chloe shuffled in with her mother at her side, eyes red but jaw stiff. Vivian looked polished as always, her expression caught between outrage and denial. The prosecutor laid out the evidence. The withdrawal email, the timestamp, the call log, the security footage. Piece by piece, the story unfolded. Chloe sat frozen, her hands clenching in her lap. At first, she said nothing. Then halfway through questioning, she cracked. She admitted she had sent the email. Admitted she'd used Ruby's phone during the graduation party. Admitted she'd made the call to her boyfriend right afterward to cover her tracks. But the words that followed changed everything. "It wasn't my idea," she blurted. "It was my mom's." The courtroom fell silent. Vivian's head whipped toward her daughter, eyes wide. "Chloe," she started, but the judge cut her off. Chloe cried as she spoke. "She told me Ruby would be fine, that she always landed on her feet. She said if I took the scholarship no one would ever know, and if they did it would be easier to blame Ruby. She said Grandma and Grandpa already agreed it was better for me." I sat rigid in my chair, my nails digging into my palms. The betrayal wasn't just Chloe's. It was orchestrated, sanctioned, and shielded by Vivian and my parents. The sentencing came quickly. Chloe, being underage, received a reduced penalty, but was expelled, fined, and assigned to community service every Saturday at the downtown bus terminal for the next year. The scholarship was gone forever, her record scarred. Vivian didn't escape unscathed. She was charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, fined, heavily sentenced to community service, and placed under probation. In court, she wept about her reputation, her daughter's future, her supposed good intentions. But no tears could wash away the truth she had chosen deceit over family. When the gavel finally struck, Ruby turned to me with tears in her eyes, but not of sadness. Relief, justice, maybe both. Weeks later, Ruby and I were walking downtown when we saw Chloe at the terminal in her orange vest scrubbing benches with her head down. Ruby froze. I reached for her hand. "Do you want to go another way?" I asked. She shook her head, no. We walked past. Chloe never looked up. Ruby didn't slow down. For once, the silence didn't hurt, it healed. Back at campus, Ruby began to thrive. She joined the debate team, started tutoring, and even got invited to a summer research program. I watched her across the kitchen table one evening, her laptop open, her face lit with focus. I realized then that the scholarship had never defined her. Her resilience had. But even as she blossomed, I couldn't shake the echo of my parents' words at their kitchen table. It stayed in the family. Chloe needed it more. They had justified betrayal as fairness, cruelty as compromise. And that more than anything was what broke me. I blocked them all, Vivian, my parents, everyone who had chosen deceit over truth. Silence became my shield. Ruby didn't ask about them, and I didn't offer updates. We were done. Still, sometimes at night, I thought about how close it had come. If Ruby hadn't remembered Chloe borrowing her phone, if I hadn't checked the camera, if the Hope Bridge Foundation hadn't stepped in, they had tried to erase her future. They had almost succeeded, but they hadn't. Ruby settled into college life like she'd been waiting her whole life to breathe. She walked taller, spoke with confidence, and filled her schedule with things that made her light up inside debate practice, tutoring sessions, late-night study groups that spilled into laughter. I watched her transformation like someone watching spring bloom after the longest winter. But healing isn't a straight line. Some nights I'd find her curled up on her dorm bed staring at the ceiling, her smile gone. "I really thought they loved me," she whispered once. "I thought at least Grandma and Grandpa would." I didn't know how to soften the truth. They had chosen Vivian and Chloe. They had chosen the lie because it was easier. I told her what I had learned myself the hard way. Sometimes people love you only when you're useful. But that's not love, it's control dressed up as care. She nodded, her jaw tight. Then I don't want it anymore. Neither did I. We never saw Vivian again after court except for whispers how she'd lost clients, how neighbors avoided her at the store, how Chloe had stopped talking to her altogether. My parents tried once sending a letter in my mother's neat handwriting. It wasn't an apology. It was a plea. Family should stick together. Mistakes were made, but Ruby is strong enough to forgive. I fed it into the shredder without reading the rest. Meanwhile, Ruby began writing. Essays at first, then longer pieces. One night, she showed me an article she'd submitted to the student paper, What It Means to Lose Your Future and Rebuild It Anyway. It spread quickly around campus, shared by students who whispered, "That's the girl who lost her scholarship but came back stronger." For the first time, she wasn't invisible. She was seen. And I learned silence can be louder than shouting. Blocking my family wasn't punishment, it was protection. Every time I ignored their attempts to reach me, I was reminding myself that peace wasn't negotiable. The true test came months later. Ruby and I were at a coffee shop when she froze. Chloe was there, sitting at a corner table in civilian clothes, staring into her drink. For a long moment, Ruby just watched her. Then she stood up, walked across the room, and placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Chloe looked up, startled. "I forgive you," Ruby said quietly, "but I'll never forget. And I'll never trust you again." Then she turned and walked back to me. I didn't ask what was written on the paper. I didn't need to. That night, Ruby told me forgiveness isn't for them. It's for me. I don't want to carry them around anymore. She was right. Life moved forward. Ruby's grades soared. She got invited to conferences, professors began mentoring her, and the Hope Bridge Foundation even highlighted her in their annual report, Resilience in Action. She was more than a survivor, she was a leader. As for me, I finally learned to stop measuring myself by the family I'd been born into, and started defining myself by the one I was building. Ruby and me side by side with honesty instead of betrayal. Sometimes at night I'd sit by the window, Benny's memory still close even though he'd passed years before, and think about the chain of events that started with one plain white envelope. If I had opened it myself, maybe I could have spared Ruby a little pain. But maybe not. Maybe she needed to see the betrayal with her own eyes to understand what real strength looks like. They thought they had broken her. They thought they had broken me, but what they really did was free us from an illusion. We never needed their approval, we only needed to remember our worth. So if you're watching this, and you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, let Ruby's story remind you of this. Your value isn't up for negotiation. Family doesn't get to define you. You define yourself. They tried to erase her future. Instead, they wrote the ending to their own story. And ours, it's just beginning. If this story touched, you don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment your thoughts. Your support helps bring more stories like this to light. End.